Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at the current economic challenges that the country is facing, of course, in light of how close we are to the deadline of the expiry of the IMF bailout program, whose chances of the ninth review are also diminishing by the day. What's important, of course, is the way that the government is planning to move ahead, especially when it's entering into the next fiscal year. There are numerous challenges that are out there for the new government, of course, and then, of course, the way that it's going to move ahead with the new budget. It's important also to take a look at the economic recovery plan that has been stressed upon by the government in this regard, and the establishment of a specific council which is going to look towards foreign direct investment in the country and to be a one-stop solution for investors. This is something that the government and previous governments had also been trying to do for quite some time now, but especially now in the current circumstances and in the challenges that the country is currently facing, this will be extremely important in terms of how it will go ahead with planning, with policy, with implementation, that are going to be important factors in determining what exactly will be the future course, especially given the fact that this is also election year, and how this body will be able to move ahead with the kind of authority that we require and the direction that needs to be set for Pakistan. So we'll take a look at where the country stands with reference to its economic challenges and try and understand the establishment of this council and the path forward that it provides. Our next segment is going to take a look at the Prime Minister's visit to France. He has arrived in the country on a two-day official visit, and this is especially important given the fact that he's going to be part of the new Global Financing Pact Summit that is going to be held in Paris. He's also going to be one of the key stakeholders and will be addressing the summit of the G77 and ahead of one of the largest developing countries most affected by climate change, something that Pakistan last year had been talking about from the front in terms of climate financing and the kind of justice that needs to be provided to Pakistan in this regard, and whether or not this particular summit will provide a way forward or any impotence for things to move in that direction still, of course, remains to be seen. But it's important that Pakistan is there to represent its case and bring forth the very important issue of climate change that is expected to affect the country even this year. So that is what we're going to be looking at the next segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, I've been joined by Farrukh Pitafi, and he's joined us from Quetta, Senior Analyst. Thank you very much, Farrukh, for being a part of the debate. We've also been joined by Dr. Mahmood Khalid, who's Senior Research Economist, Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. He's joined us in the studios. Thank you very much, Dr. Mahmood, for being part of the discussion. And we will be later also joined by Dr. Aqdas Afzal, who's a Senior Economist. Let me start with you, Dr. Mahmood. Given the current scenario and the fact that the chances of the IMF actually materializing are very, very low, where exactly would you then place the kind of recovery plan that the country has set, given that the new budget itself poses numerous challenges to the country? We're just going to enter the fiscal year in a couple of days or a week, and then, of course, the recovery plan is going to be something new that the country will also have to sort of deal with and figure out how far they're going to proceed in terms of actually implementing the plan. So in terms of the positioning that the country is in, given the economic situation, what do you think is the future prospect of this recovery plan?
Well, definitely, as you have mentioned, that it's a very critical juncture in time because the political cycle is also going to end. So the government was faced both with a kind of a short-term scenario in which they had to come out with an out-of-box solution, as well as put forth some kind of a recovery plan which actually they have targeted up to 2035, in which they could bring back the economy to its potential level. So from that context, we have seen few days back that in the budget they have announced certain measures in which they have targeted few sectors which are actually buoyant in terms of economic growth, such as the agriculture sector is given main priority because that has been our backbone in terms of growth, employment, as well as food sustainability. And on top of that, they have also given certain incentives to the IT sector, the small and medium enterprises, and some development programs for the youth, such as the laptop scheme and the small loans which are going to be provided. So that was a kind of a shortened scenario. Now what they have done is that they have come out with a plan in which they have proposed that along with investment options from the other countries, they should target the GCC countries, which are basically those kind of aligned countries with us, which had been there in terms of our trade relationship, our diaspora, and all other facilitations. So from that perspective, they have set up a very important council in which they have proposed structure which is going to help bring in the desired investments by creating a kind of a credibility of whatever commitments are going to be required for such types of investments.
Right, absolutely. Farrukh, the important aspects of this council was something we discussed even yesterday, and you outlined the kind of direction it's going to set. But in terms of making sure that this authority actually achieves its objectives and is able to implement whatever it is that it recommends and moves ahead with, it's also important to consider the circumstances the country is in. Of course, this is election year, and we've faced different obstacles in the past also with reforms of any kind or any kind of direction to at least be given enough time for it to set the tone. Do you think that this council will have a different destiny?
Thank you, Sarah. I think that it is the most pertinent question at this moment. I understand that in the past we have tried to move towards the reforms of, for that matter, opening up of the economy, but they have more or less failed because of two things. One, actually three things. One, economic stability. Two, because of lack of political consensus. And third, of course, populism itself, because in the end, when it comes to getting rid of, divesting from, public SOEs, it becomes quite an onerous task. There are people who eventually are laid off, and the situation demands restructuring of the workforce. So this was the case in the past. But we sort of have hit the rock bottom, Sana. At this moment, if we are still speculating, will IMF do something or won't it? Whether we will get bankrupt or not, whether the situation is going to get dire still, and then the current circumstances, given the inflation, especially food inflation, with that kind of a situation, Sana, I think that gradually a national consensus is emerging that this kind of situation is not acceptable. So I think that in the long run also, this intervention that the government of Pakistan has come up with, this committee with its three-tiered system, one apex committee, the other one, the executive committee, especially established with the help of provincial governments, and then the implementation committee that is going to meet every week. That actually is most welcome step. That is because we have been hearing that many of the GCC countries, as was pointed out earlier, have been actually showing their intent to invest in Pakistan. But remember, Sana, when Saudi Prince was coming to Pakistan at that time, what exactly happened? At that time, Imran Khan Sahab, the chairman of PTI, announced that they are going to protest and they are going to ambush Islamabad. Similarly, when the head of UAE was coming to Pakistan, the same party did something similar. So with that kind of a situation, the government was finding it difficult to create the kind of circumstances that were needed to ensure that the investment comes to the country. Now, what we have been hearing recently is that there are, a number of countries, at least four, who want to invest somewhere around $20 to $25 billion each in Pakistan, right? With that kind of a possibility of monies coming to the country, if we can do whatever it takes to ensure that their investment is safe and they don't have to go through all the hassles that are faced by investors in the country, then situation becomes very easy and it becomes very promising, right? And then look at the sectoral divide as well, from agriculture to IT to minerals. Sana, today I sat through a meeting here in Quetta, and I came across the information about how much ores there are. In Likoteg itself, the only place that has been contentious for quite some time, although we already have a mining company that is working there, but I'm talking about the terrain and the possibility. There, billions of tons of copper is, found. Similarly, this is the age of lithium, and because of batteries, we are told that Balochistan has found lithium underground as well. So any country or any company that comes to this country to actually build upon whatever we have got, these sky's the limit, Sana. So I think it was most prudent step, and it was the right time as well. There seems to be a national consensus, almost a national consensus, and then we realize that even if you meet IMF's demands, and even if IMF in principle agrees to continue the program at least till its fruition, and then we can renegotiate, we still will be needing $2 to $3 billion to shore up their reserves and to actually fulfill our external commitments. So if you get at least one of these countries invest in Pakistan, especially in SOEs, which are being run poorly by the state apparatus, I think this country will start, sailing through, and things are going to get better. And inclusion of army, particularly army chief in the apex committee, also ensures that that after changes, things will improve. Right.
Right, but I've also, you've brought this up, and I wanted to explore this further as well. So Farrukh, I'll come to you with reference to the role that Army can possibly play. I understand the kind of input that you're saying will help benefit certain projects, but exactly how do you think that this will be able to move ahead with the way that the investors perhaps is looking at the council's role, or how it is going to move ahead in terms of making sure that the project materializes in the way that the stakeholders are involved in the business or financial aspects of the country? How exactly will the Army be able to contribute in all of that?
Right. One very important thing about this entire body is that it is going to actually have a sector on defense production as well, right? So that is important too. Then Army's role becomes important. But there is another thing. In the past, whenever we needed bailout, our army chief used to go to various countries, right? So I think that role is also very important, and that will guarantee that beyond this term, policy sustainability is ensured.
Right. So just for clarification, so the Army's role will be limited to the defense sector projects only, and can possibly be in bailout in the future?
I think that when commitment is coming, when financial commitment is coming, when investment is coming, anybody who wants to invest in Pakistan is looking for how much these policies continue beyond this government, right? So the Prime Minister and the provincial governments, particularly provincial ministers who are involved, and the federal minister, they all are going to change twice in the coming 4 or 5 months. First, because of the caretaker setup, and then beyond that after elections also. So who's going to guarantee that there is some continuity in the policy? Army being one of the permanent institutions, their presence will ensure that it works like a paperweight, that we are here, and when we are guaranteeing these policies, they are going to continue. And I think that anybody who's in their right mind will ensure that these policies, especially I'm talking about politicians, that even if they are from other parties, that these policies are guaranteed and they continue.
Right. Dr. Mahmood, the important aspect of the Council, of course, or anything that Pakistan would like in the future with regards to the bringing in money is with foreign direct investment and getting more and more people here and investing in the country. And for that, of course, the investor will need to understand that this is something in their benefit. I want to understand how the Council is moving ahead with convincing the investors this is something that they should be doing, that this is what is going to be beneficial for them in the long run, given the current circumstances, given the political instability, given the economic crisis that the country is facing. Will the Council be able to attract FDI?
Well, as Farrukh have rightly explained, that one of the aspects in terms of a good policy is the consistency. And everybody knows that the political government's tenure are going to end in August, and there had to be a kind of a certain pillar which is going to remain there and which is going to steer through into the next government. So This is a kind of a symbolic gesture in which we see that the permanency of such setups are going to be there. Second is the historical significance of army as an institution itself, whether it was COVID, whether it was the disaster or even the current cyclone and other aspects. The army as an institution is always there in terms of providing the necessary kind of governance setups or taking the job done as per requirement. But specifically speaking on the council terms and conditions, it is going to work like a single window operation in which it is not going to kind of do the nitty-gritties of the things, but it is going to ensure that all the allied setups in terms of the provincial governments, in terms of the regulatory bodies, in terms of the state bank giving permissions for the financial transactions, they should all be basically kind of dealt with within one house. And that is going to actually help in terms of building the confidence for the investors so that they can come into the country and invest in those areas which we normally refer to as a green field, in which there is very dearth of investment and the potential therefore is also very high. Like Pitafi has just mentioned that even the defense production is one of the areas in which the foreign investment is sought after. The mineral is another sector, the agriculture is another sector. But having said that, you are also very right in terms of like spelling out this problem with our policy consistency, that how will it ensure in terms of going ahead. So what we see as an analyst towards this council is that they have to co-opt those members which are actually going to provide them that roadmap which should be aligned with such types of investments. Unfortunately, if we only go for reserve development through these FDIs as a kind of a stopgap arrangement, then this is not going to be sustainable, because any business coming in Pakistan is going to ask for the return which they have to take back. So there has to be coherent policy, and I'm sure that as the things get more clear, there is going to be a complete roadmap in which there is going to be an alignment with our economic growth agenda and these foreign investments coming in. And once that is done, then we will see long run growth impact of such investments.
Right, absolutely. We also like to welcome Dr. Aqdas Afzal, Senior Economist, who's joined us online. Thank you, Dr. Aqdas, for being a part of the discussion. We're talking about the Special Investment Facilitation Council that has been established, and the kind of direction that the country wants to set, and the importance of such a council. And we've discussed the fact that when we talk about this platform, this is something that the government has been wanting to do for quite some time. And even previously, we've been hearing about one-stop solutions for investment in the country. What do you think will be substantially different in this particular council that hasn't been provided as a solution to business investors in the past?
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. I think this recent this announcement from the government that they are forming this new investment facilitation council, which is a three-tiered body, with an apex committee, with a mid-tier committee, and with an implementation committee. I think that's very welcome. And I think the efficacy of this arrangement is basically going to be in the domain of policy continuity. Because, I mean, this is one thing in which I think Pakistan or this government as well as the previous governments have been found wanting is policy continuity. So I think this could be really the first step when it comes to going about forming a new economic consensus that everybody has been talking about. So I think there are two things that I want to say here. Number one, I sincerely hope and pray and feel that this initiation or this arrangement of a new three-tiered committee does not come at the expense of us not getting the successful ninth review from the IMF. I think that is still very important, and I'm really hoping, I'm in a minority at this moment, at this time I'm in a minority, but I'm still hoping that somehow Pakistan is going to be able to have a successful ninth review with the IMF. I'm still hoping for that.
And what is your hope based on, may I ask?
Well, on the few things. Number one, I think it is based on the pronouncements that have come from the government itself. I mean, recently we know that the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, who is a man who is very careful with his words, had expressed a lot of confidence in reaching a successful ninth review just about 10 days ago. And if you see the kind of statements coming out from the Ministry of Finance, I mean, they're making it very clear that they have done whatever the IMF has asked them to do. So that's number one, the confidence that the political leadership has shown. Point number two of why I feel that I think Pakistan might be able to have a successful ninth review has to do with this present conference in which the Prime Minister is now participating, that's taking place in France as we speak. And I was just reading about it, and I'm just going to tell you about the name of this conference, which is Summit for New Global Financing Pact. And this is a very high-powered conference being held in France right now with the head of the World Bank, Mr. Ajay Banga, as well as the MD of the IMF, Ms. Kristalina Georgieva, are participating. So I think the Prime Minister going over to this summit, this event, shows the sincerity that he attaches to having a successful ninth review. And if you look at what the people who are participating in the summit are saying, they're basically saying that because of massive climate change, the developed world, the global north, has to now assist countries like Pakistan in the global south with transitioning to clean energy. So where on the one hand, they're talking about assisting countries in the global south with transitioning to clean energy, assisting them with, debt restructuring, it would be very difficult for them to then come up with any reason and say that, we are not going to go ahead with Pakistan. So I think that's the second dimension of why I am hopeful. And finally, I think it has to do with just the geopolitical arrangement of everything. I mean, as you know, that recently there has been talk of the fact that Pakistan is facing all these issues because of geopolitical challenges or this worsening rivalry between the US and China. As we speak, the Prime Minister of a neighboring country is being feted in the United States. Now, if the IMF decides to not continue with Pakistan, I think a lot of people, it's going to give this impression to a lot of people that indeed it is because of this changing geopolitical arrangement that Pakistan is now being denied further funding. So I think because of these two or three things, first, that the government is sounding confident. They say they have done everything that they can. They're still making last-ditch efforts. The Prime Minister is in France. The Finance Minister was meeting with the US Ambassador, as well as the agendas that are changing with countries in the global north, and the fact that certain countries would not want this, the whole thing to appear as if this is because of geopolitical changes. I'm still hopeful that Pakistan is going to be able to snatch a deal out of the jaws of the IMF.
Okay, Dr. Aqdas, I want to explore the last bit that you mentioned in terms of how certain countries would not like this to be something that appears to be because of their interactions. Does that also include the IMF as an institution who would like to avoid that? And will that be a major driving force in terms of just a perception that people may have? We've been talking about geopolitics before. This has been something that has been there in the past as well. But do you think it's enough to push them to decide on going ahead with the ninth review?
No, I don't think so. I think no single variable, no single reason is good enough. I think it's going to be a combination of all these different things that I've talked about. I mean, these considerations are definitely going to have a weight, but no single consideration is significant enough to tip the scales in Pakistan's favor. Now, I don't want to, sit here and talk about the fact what has gone wrong or what could have the government done differently. I think that analysis must come after June 30th, when we are in a situation where we know for sure whether the IMF has decided to move ahead with Pakistan or they have decided not to. So I think that post-mortem analysis will be done after June 30th.
Absolutely. We're going to be focusing also more closely at the conference, the summit that is happening in Paris. But since it's also, of course, very relevant to the discussion we're having, we'll bring that in. But before that, Farrukh, I also want to understand your insight of whether or not there's any subtle changes in the way that we are perceiving the stance coming in from the IMF towards Pakistan, and that possibly because of or other also factors that Dr. Aqdas has raised and perhaps other variables and to be involved as well, seem to be pointing towards the possibility that there may still be a ninth review?
Very interesting has happened. Since we last spoke, I think that Dr. Aqdas's school of thought has actually converted me into an optimist as well. I think that the efforts the government of Pakistan was already making, that it was fulfilling most of the agenda points that were actually there, that were offered from the IMF. That was already there. Pakistan was complying with most of it. But the actual sticking points, Sana, was essentially our, this financing gap of 3 billion. Originally, it was 6 billion, and then we managed to get the certification of the written commitments that were asked by IMF, and then and that was about $3 billion. Now, even if IMF actually offers 1.2 billion that we will get through the ninth review, even then you are going to still need some money to take care of that financing gap. Now, because the government, everybody keeps on calling it government's plan B, I think it is, as I pointed out yesterday, this body that is, this council that is created, it is plan A addendum. It is going to add to the plan A, right? And that is IMF. So I think that we wouldn't have created this body so quickly had there been no commitments coming from other countries or these countries that have already committed that they want to actually invest in a bigger amount, right? So I'm sure that once that kind of a situation emerges, we are going to actually fulfill the most important demand from IMF, and then this can happen. Then the government of Pakistan is very active. Dr. Aqdas is very right, especially when it comes to this France summit, because in 1945 and in 1940s, when the current Bretton Woods system actually came into existence, Pakistan did not exist. Independent India did not exist. So these countries had no voice in how these structures are going to be built. But now it seems that there is a commitment from the leaders of the world that these institutions need to adapt. So Pakistan's voice there, as we will look in the next segment, will be very important. But that is not all. Even right now, I think that we can talk about geopolitics all we want, but no country would want any other country next to their own border to be financially insolvent. So, Narendra Modi, when he's in America, he has his own agenda. Elon Musk went to, China earlier, and he left singing praises. Similarly, Xi Jinping, President Xi, met with Bill Gates before meeting with Blinken, Secretary Blinken. And at that time also it seemed that everyone is invested in China. So at this moment, it seems that the agenda is going to be to attract as much FDI as possible. That's why Prime Minister Modi has met with Elon Musk and invited him to invest in the country. He's going to meet other people, and then there are going to be defense deals, other deals. So the focus essentially is there on those issues, not on trying to, default Pakistan. So because of that, and Pakistan is putting in an effort, our Prime Minister met with most of the ambassadors here. Then today, our Finance Minister also met with the American ambassador. So all of them are trying to push, both sides, that is IMF and Pakistan, to, come together and resolve this issue. So I'm very hopeful. And going back to this committee itself, because Army's role was discussed, I think Dr. Mahmood made a brilliant point regarding the investment and the Army's role in it. That Army, wherever it has played its role, I'm very glad, Sanad, that I am here in Quetta right now, because thanks to our hosts, that is the Balochistan government, we have learned so much. Pakistan is not a golden goose. It is made of diamond, and it can lay, diamond eggs every day. So any idea that this country can default is laughable, honestly. I think there's so much potential underground, over the ground, among the people, in the neighborhood as well, that Pakistan, if it starts to actually move in the right direction, that is reform and bringing in FDI, things are going to be magical. Similarly, Army's role in NCOC, in Islamabad, we did not know NCOC was doing what. But today I was told by a health minister, and that is amazing, that when India's oxygen crisis was going on, preemptively, the government of Pakistan ensured, or NCOC ensured, that there is enough oxygen everywhere in Pakistan, including far-flung areas in Balochistan. So Army's role in that context also, its reputation is also very important. So this involvement in this committee, SIFC, and then their assurance that these policies are going to continue is most welcome. Pakistan is pulling in the right direction, and I am very confident that we are going to resolve the issue with IMF. We are going to have a stable government after the elections, and after that also, we are going to get inundated with FDI.
All right. Dr. Mahmood, before we move on to what's going on in Paris, I also want your take in terms of what we keep on hearing coming in from the government and the finance ministries that we've given in and talked about all the obligations or conditions the IMF has laid down, and the country has done whatever it was required to do. But we, of course, know that there have been issues and flags raised regarding the budget, and that's perhaps something still that hasn't been resolved. Given whatever the circumstances exist today, can we expect the IMF to move ahead without those certain flags or objections raised to the budget also being reversed by the government? Is that a possibility, or will that only happen eventually if the government concedes to what the IMF is saying?
No, actually, the IMF is not just looking at very nitty-gritties. They are more concerned with the overall macro picture.
Yes.
So if the government can actually convince them that agreed we have done something which was not mandated, but we have also given some kind of a relief in terms of taking back that additional amount from some other sources like...
But I believe the IMF is saying that the specific actions that they require need to be done so that that direction is followed, and that whatever is currently outlined is not moving in that direction.
Yeah, I totally agree with their prescription that whatever they have asked for has not been fully met, but as a sovereign country, we are also independent in terms of our making policies. So it's a matter of convincing them that this is our blueprint of how we think that the economy is going to move forward. And in that, if 99% of their recommendations have been met, few things are there that can be met in terms of creating additional resources from other places. But I'm sure that the things are going to settle in the right direction.
All right. Dr. Aqdas, whether or not we are going to see the 9th review, it's also, of course, going to be important for Pakistan to be in conversation with the IMF once again. And there have been talks of how the IMF will then wait for the new government to be in place before that actually happens. And then for that to move forward and actually materialize into some monetary benefit for the country will take many months. And even if we have the money coming in from the 9th review, there is still going to be a lot of payments that the country will have to make in the first half of the fiscal year, a lot of challenges that the country is facing. And if the IMF is not going to be part of that conversation during that time, can we and would we be able to rely on our bilateral engagements, especially with regards to external debt?
Okay, so I think your question is very interesting. I think the number one challenge facing Pakistan or Pakistani society was the political uncertainty, volatility issue. And I think to a very large extent, that seems to be dissipating, as far as I can tell. And I think so the next big challenge is the one coming from economics, for the poor state of economic indicators. And I think, as far as I see, like I said, I'm still hopeful that the IMF is going to sign on the dotted line with Pakistan for the ninth review. I really hope that I'm correct on this. And yes, I mean, whichever government is sworn in after the next elections is going to have its plate full with its own set of challenges. But I think this is where the special investment council comes in, because this then tells your would-be lenders or would-be partners that no matter which government is in place, the state of Pakistan is going to guarantee that whatever projects we have promised to work on, we'll keep working on them. So I think this is where this institution is really worth its weight in gold. And so I think it's a very interesting step forward. I think they are building on the successes of the NCOC, which basically showed the rest of the world that Pakistani institutions have tremendous agility. Given the steep challenges, different institutions of the state have the ability to come together and attack challenges. And I think this is in the same vein. And for this reason, I'm very hopeful that the coming months are going to be better for Pakistani people who have suffered so much at the hands of both political and economic uncertainty in the last 2 years.
And so you think that talk surrounding possibilities of default is something that is overstretching the current situation, and what the ministry has been reiterating for quite some time now with regards to default is something that is still true?
Even according to people who believe that there is a very strong, a very high probability of default, even these independent analysts are saying that there is no chance of Pakistan defaulting, given where we are standing without IMF until November, December of this year. And there are still 7 months to go, and things change very rapidly in the world. And so I'm hopeful that Pakistani leadership, Pakistani political leadership is going to have the skill and the acumen to work around these challenges. And in order to give you evidence of that, I mean, look at the current account numbers that are coming out. Pakistan, despite the sound and the fury, the opposition that is being, the criticism that is being leveled against the Pakistani political leadership, we've just had 3 consecutive months of current account surplus, total value of $1 billion. Even if we continue like this, let me repeat it, even if we continue like this, at the end of the next 12 months, we will have a surplus foreign exchange of $4.5 billion. So I don't think Pakistan is going to default anytime soon. And I think all talk of Pakistan defaulting is premature, and I think time will prove such people wrong.
Right, and that of course is the hope. And Farrukh, you can add to that, but also we'll be moving on to the Prime Minister's visit to France, and he's of course there on a 2-day official visit, and as Dr. Aqdas was earlier talking about, to participate in the new Global Financing Pact Summit that is being held in Paris. And this is important, of course, in terms of the kind of discussions it will have with important stakeholders, and especially for Pakistan to be able to put its perspective on the agenda as well, and to sensitize the world about what the country is facing and the challenges that lie ahead as well. And I want you to also shed light on whether or not that is going to have as the most foundational aspect of it in the climate change issues of Pakistan, or the climate-induced disasters that the country is potentially going to face. Will that be the sort of premise that we will be moving ahead with in our conversations?
All right, Sanam, as was pointed out earlier, and as I mentioned also, this is a very important summit. It can redefine the world in coming days. Remember that there are many things that are happening. Climate change is only one of them, right?
Okay.
This other major concern is going to be automation. And automation, as I keep on writing and keep on saying, is going to displace a lot of jobs. Similarly, remember that even in that scenario, it is not AI which is going to displace jobs, it is billionaires who are going to replace human labor with machines. So in that kind of situation also there needs to be a consensus on various measures that to ensure that there isn't chaos. Similarly, there are many other issues that are actually coming back up. We saw COVID, what COVID did. So we need a kind of emergency response possible for similar kind of situations in the coming days as well. I keep on saying that COVID was not essentially a crisis of push or pull for that matter of capital or demand. It was essentially a crisis of labor because people who work could not go to their workplaces of work. So any response needs a mega redoing of the system in which we exist. And then, of course, it is also being said that two other concerns, that the rise of or the possible clash of the great powers is going to define where we are at. And then we are seeing what is happening in Ukraine, and because of that, there is a super cycle, and because of that, there is possibility of hunger in sub-Saharan Africa, in Arab countries, in our parts as well. So the world actually needs to come together and revamp the system. Pakistan's being there is important, and Pakistan's case study is also important. And I've heard that we are primarily going to focus on our environmental challenges, but I hope that we can actually contribute to other sectoral discussions as well, because they are going to affect us as well, whether we like it or not. COVID could have actually destroyed our economy as well, just as much as floods did. Similarly, AI or automation is going to have an impact on this country as well as every other country. And then this clash or this clash of big powers, and because of that, inflation is actually wreaking havoc with every country. So there has to be a commitment on food security, global food security as well. So I'm hoping that Pakistan, apart from actually taking care of its own situation, can contribute to other discussions as well.
Absolutely. And Dr. Mahmood, this is important, given, of course, that the Prime Minister earlier also apprised the ambassadors of different countries regarding particularly, of course, the government's efforts towards the IMF, but also in terms of putting forward the government's stance and Pakistan's position. Now, this is a much bigger platform and a much wider range of issues, as Farrukh was pointing out. But in terms of what Pakistan's particular objectives or concerns may be from gaining from this summit, what would be the take home from this? What would be a success for Pakistan to come out of this? Because at the end of the day, whenever we talk about large scale summits or conferences that are held between countries, there is a lot of discussion on what needs to be done or the important challenges that are faced globally, but there is less in terms of action and less in terms of the actual materialization of those commitments, and perhaps a problem with following up with those commitments as well. So in terms of Pakistan's victory, what would you say after the conclusion of the two-day visit that we would be able to foresee for the country?
Well, actually, you have rightly pointed out that this is the issue in terms of the North versus the South debate, where it's not just about what they're committing, how actually they are going to deliver later on that. And if you look at the history, whether it's the climate change agreements or whether it's related to the financing of the disaster affected countries, they have not been able to provide the necessary resources. So what I feel that in the case of Pakistan, what we are hoping is, and many other institutions have actually also voiced the same thing, like the IMF head has said that now it's time that the developing countries should be provided with some debt relief with regards to the climate change disasters which has happened. And that was the same case when the UN Secretary General also came to Pakistan, and they also vowed that the evidence is here that it's not Pakistan's own climatic change incurrence because of their economic movements, it's because of the West. So there should be some relief which can be given to countries like Pakistan, in which a kind of a debt rescheduling or a kind of a debt relief can be provided, which can actually help economies to rebuild. It's not something which we are asking for over and above our requirements for kind of rehabilitating what has been destroyed in the floods. But still there is a need which cannot be met individually by Pakistan only. All the global south has to actually come together to vouch their voices, because individually countries do not have that much kind of a lobbying or a kind of a voting therein. So that needs a collective effort. Only then Pakistan would also be able to benefit from it.
All right. And Dr. Aqdas, you've mentioned about the importance of the summit before as well, but regardless of what Pakistan may be looking to achieve in this, when we talk about the kind of issues that are there, especially in terms of financial regulation and in the way that the future is evolving around AI and technological advancement, it's important, of course, for countries to address the global challenges together and collectively. And we see that that has perhaps only rarely happened, or has happened in case of crises, and perhaps not in a situation that urges the country to do so in a relatively stable period. How will this summit or summits like these push the international institutions, the financial regulatory bodies and the countries to ensure that the way forward is then in fact in the favor of everyone, and is what the countries will then move ahead with? Where is the accountability?
Well, I think this upcoming summit, the Summit for New Global Financing Pact, I think this is going to be really a test case. And it is really going to reveal to the rest of the world how the different, how should I say, bones of contention between the global north and the global south are going to be hammered out in these events, in these summits, because the kind of problems that we are now facing as a planet is going to require a lot of regulation, coordination, and cooperation. So even if you look at the rapid progress in the field of artificial intelligence, there is now talk of setting up bodies whereby there can be inputs as to how this artificial intelligence can be regulated, because there are now realistic fears about the direction in which artificial intelligence development is going, as far as the speed with which it is traveling, or with which this progress is taking place. So I think, like I mentioned, I mean, this summit is going to be a test case as to how the global north and the global south are going to be able to hammer out their differences peacefully. And in the final analysis, there has to be more voice for countries of the global south, simply because there is a great majority of the global population living in countries of the global south, including China. So I think the time has come for a rebalancing, and I hope that this is the first step, this summit in France, and I'm hoping for some very positive news coming out of this summit in the case of Pakistan's successful completion of the 9th review with the IMF.
Okay. All right. Farrukh, anything you'd like to add?
Listen, I wanted to actually praise and appreciate the leadership of President Macron, because he has once again proven that his heart is in the right place and he is very conscientious. Let us hope that this actually bears fruit, and with that, let us thank him as well.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Farrukh, for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Aqdas Afzal. Thank you, Dr. Mahmood, for being a part of the discussion. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.